Today we are going to be talking about the future. First, let's talk about the imminent impending future. Let's travel about a year forward to January 1st, 2021. Things look pretty much the same with a few slight differences. The iPhone 12 cameras is out, Reddit upvotes have been declared legal tender, and Baby Yoda is in prison for racketeering. But, more important than all of that, the unthinkable has finally happened. The Office has just left Netflix for NBC's new streaming service.
Great practical joke.
Netflix.
Got me go to the annex.
Crab Fest is back at Red Lobster with 9 craveable crab
When this happens, there's a good chance that an unprecedented number of users will decide not to renew their subscriptions in favor of an NBC subscription, causing Netflix to collapse in on itself and die. To add insult to injury, Netflix recently lost Friends to Warner Media, but not before blowing $80 to $100 million just to keep it on their platform for one more year. And this is really only just the beginning. There are plenty of networks now that are starting their own streaming services. Disney Plus, for example, is already a massive success with over 10 million subscribers after they took all their IPs with them. Hell, pretty soon every network will have their own 10-a-month streaming service with exclusive access to their shows, meaning streaming services like Netflix are pretty much going to be restricted to their own original content and a few other shows that nobody else wanted to drag with them. That sounds pretty dire. Well, then maybe we'll see some kind of bundle system where you can pay, say, $60 a month for several different networks and then... oh... isn't that the hellscape we left behind with cable television? No, let's not worry about that. Right now, suffice it to say, Netflix is probably screwed, unless they figure something out, and they better do it fast. If I were a Netflix executive, I'd recognize the reality that eventually the remainers may only be subscribing to Netflix for its Netflix originals, or else not at all. So, when it comes to the production of these originals, the margin of error has never been smaller. The problem with creating wildly successful shows stems from the fact that you can't really tell how people will respond to specific shows before you make them. So you're going to have to find the genres that people like and cater accordingly. So because the two shows I mentioned previously were massively successful sitcoms, you might think that the solution would be to make or revive another successful sitcom. Funny that you'd mention that, because Netflix actually tried that with Arrested Development Season 4 and 5, and it was just dreadful. Season 4 in particular has its moments, but the pacing is ruined. It just feels like the writers drank a pint of stupid juice, leading the characters into painfully flat narratives that feel as tedious as they are unnatural. But that kind of falls outside the scope of this video. There are two specific genres that have seen a major surge in popularity recently. The first is horror, but I'll be specific and say horror/thriller because massively successful horror movies and TV shows like It, A Quiet Place, Us, and Stranger Things aren't just in the horror genre. There's a bunch of science that shows people react to horror differently than any other genre. People like horror movies because they like the sense of dread and hopelessness that horror movies bring. But like I said, we're seeing an uptick in horror thriller movies, and people have responded extremely well to it. At this point, audiences even expect to get the same shock and fear from a horror movie while being told a nuanced story sans the tired horror tropes of cheesy slashers. People knock cheap jump scares so much these days that you almost wouldn't believe they were the standard for the longest time. Then on the other hand, there's science fiction. Sci-fi is one of the most interesting uses of storytelling because the possibilities are literally endless. You can construct whole new worlds, galaxies, and universes. You can tell speculative stories that really seem possible, stories that tickle your r/futurology fancy, or extreme and abstract stories of alien civilizations that border on or even cross into fantasy. Thousands of such stories have been produced, and most of them are complete and utter garbage. This issue is probably a direct result of the general danger of sci-fi shows becoming too bloated. It's hard enough to follow a new and unfamiliar story in the first place. After 5 minutes of watch time, it's not like you, the viewer, have any more attachment to the show than anything else on Netflix, so what's to stop you from clicking off and watching something else from Netflix's endless sea of serials? People need a lot of convincing to actually enjoy a show and to continue watching. We ask ourselves, at least subconsciously, why should I care about these characters? Why should I care about the story? Do I like the way the characters interact with each other and react to the environment? And to be fair, a lot of shows of all genres pull this off well enough to make you say, well, alright, Netflix, I guess I'll keep watching. Now imagine doing all of this while the show is desperately trying to explain to you why there is a poorly CGI'd alien on your television screen.
When the ones you love turn their back on you.
You see the problem? You have to justify the existence of all of the same things as any other show and justify the existence of a bunch of other goofy future-y shit. Now the viewer is asking all of the same questions as before and questions about the existence of alien worlds, quantum physics, and don't even get me started on how disrespectfully most shows handle time travel. This isn't to say that horror thrillers cannot run into similar problems. It feels like sci-fi writers can be a lot less conscious of these dangers and can rely too much on dense lore and special effects to make up for actual substance. This brings me to a show I saw recently called Another Life. No, Another Life didn't have the answers to any of those questions I posed before. The questions it did make me ask were along the lines of, would a just God allow this to exist? Is this cruelty the righteous punishment for the sins of man? Now let me clarify, I regard Netflix somewhat highly when it comes to sci-fi. Maniac, the first season of Lost in Space, and Stranger Things are all shows I have enjoyed to some degree. But when I talk about Another Life being a complete waste of time, I don't mean it in the way that Black Mirror screwed up a couple of seasons, or in the way that I found Stranger Things 3 to be a disappointing step backwards. I'm talking about a show that is bankrupt of any visible inspiration without an evident path towards salvation. Now, what exactly is Another Life? Well, according to IMDb, astronaut Nico Breckenridge and her young crew face unimaginable danger as they go on a high-risk mission to explore the genesis of an alien artifact. Really? Unimaginable danger. God, that is about as vanilla as you can get in the synopsis box. Gee, I wonder if something will go wrong on the mission. I wonder if space will turn out to be dangerous. I wonder if the crew members won't get along or something and have to be united by their captain's strong, unwavering leadership. If those plot points fit your definition of unimaginable, then you might have a shit imagination. F off. This show has no idea what it wants to be. The writers tried this brilliant tactic where they took plot points and themes from popular sci-fi movies and TV shows and mixed them all together, hoping they had stolen enough that you wouldn't be able to tell exactly what was stolen. Well, first of all, I can tell you exactly what they're ripping off from Star Trek, Arrival, Alien, The Expanse, and every Aliens Among Us plotline ever. And even if you can't pick out the specific plotlines they're stealing, it's the same effect as mixing every color from your Crayola 64 crayons together. It looks like shit. I could go through the whole show beat by beat and explain to you at every point what problem I have with it, but I'll be honest with you, it's like 7 or 8 hours long and I really do not want to watch it again. But you obviously aren't here to listen to me give a general overview of a terrible TV show. You want me. You want to be convinced. Or maybe it's just entertaining to watch someone get way too upset about something that is probably inconsequential. And honestly, if you have a problem with that, why are you even here? Did you miss my video where I poo-pooed the entire art form of animated film because of a movie made for babies? So let's make an example out of the first episode and call it there. Watching this show is like watching the aftermath of a pileup on the interstate. There's no real reason for anything that happens. Maybe you can pinpoint the cause after some review, but it soon completely gets outscored by the clamorous fallout that soon follows. As soon as you start the show, it's clear the writers knew where they wanted the show to end up, but they didn't have a clue how to make the characters or plot motivated in that direction. Literally, the first scene is the ship captain, Nico, telling her husband that she needs to f*** off to space for 6 months to investigate the origin of an alien artifact that has appeared on Earth. It's the classic excuse of she's the only person who can lead the mission, which is never really explained. Apparently, the second most qualified person isn't going to cut it for the mission, which Nico decides because she trained him. On top of that, it's alluded to that she severely f***ed up her last mission, so she doesn't even have a good track record.
And if you're off your game because you got 10 of your crewmates killed, own it.
Making sense yet? No? Good. About 1 month into the voyage of the spaceship Salvare, Nico was woken up because the planet where they thought the artifact came from turned out to be not there, because dark matter created an optical illusion.
Light from the star has been refracted around this massive field of dark matter.
Now don't be fooled, this is them throwing nerd shit at you hoping you'll get distracted and think, wow, science and future is so cool, like a good little Redditor. Do not question the fake pop pseudoscience, only consume. Then we're introduced to the rest of the ship's crew. I swear I've watched this scene like 5 times, and every time I see a character I just don't recognize at all, because most of them have barely any role in the rest of the series.
Yeah, William, if you could wait till after my REM cycle, there are some dreams that should be allowed to finish.
None of these characters really have much substance. There's a character, Michelle, and her entire personality is the F word.
Was it something I said?
Yes, it was something you said. Are you f***ing kidding me? Her brother died on the Pilgrim for brains. Holy f***.
very appealing. The guy that made a cringy joke about having a 12-year-old's wet dream or whatever is introduced as Urca, the trainee of Nico who was going to be the ship's captain before she took over. None of these characters make any sense in the context of a ship crew. To start, they're all way too young and don't appear to have any formal training. One of the characters is some kind of diplomat or something, and apparently he's never been in artificial gravity before. And forgive my ignorance, but that just doesn't sound right.
Enjoy your private room.
Okay, as the public's representative and mission observer, my room is a diplomatic perk.
Diplomatic perk.
Yeah, that's not funny.
You may have also noticed that they're all dressed in normal millennial fashion, and far be it for me to project my own cynicism into my interpretations of the show, but it kind of seems like a thinly veiled attempt to make the characters seem slightly less homogenous in lieu of actual character traits. Anyway, the main conflict of the episode is that the characters are trying to, like, slingshot around a sun, but the ship keeps getting beaten up by solar flares or something, so Nico needs to take a longer route. Urca, however, tells Nico that there is a way to get to the destination faster by using the ship's force field.
The Safari has a force field.
It's not really a force field, but
It's more of a bubble, one that deflects energy particles.
And energy burst.
Oh, so like a force field. Exactly like a force field almost. Dumbass. Then the ship's AI shoots the idea down because he claims there's an 11% chance it won't work.
Well, the science is there, but if you're looking for a sure thing, keep looking. There's an 11% chance the bubble won't be strong enough.
Which means there's an 89% chance that it will.
Can I just say how annoying it is when shows do that? There is no way you didn't just pull that number out of your ass so you sound like you know what you're talking about. But let's suspend our disbelief for a minute, and you know how much I love to do that. Wouldn't it make more sense to take a shorter trip because A, there is an alien artifact on Earth that needs to be investigated as soon as possible, and B, something else could go wrong on the ship in the extra time it takes to get to the destination. I wouldn't even be mad if they said it had like a 60% chance of working, but nearly 90%? It just seems brainless. This is a big problem with this show. They deflate the stakes so unnecessarily, and they are completely inconsistent with their sense of immediacy. I haven't even brought up Nico's husband, who's attempting to parlay with the aliens back on Earth while taking care of their daughter. They rob us of any emotional stakes by pretending the internal conflict doesn't exist at all. So every consequence that results from a stupid decision of a character seems completely deserved. Not that it would even be selfish of Nico to choose the shortest path, like I mentioned earlier. And even then, if a character dies, you probably didn't have a lot of time to get attached to them over the course of the show, and they'll be swapped out with a crew member who is in hypersleep. A pretty convenient gimmick, which serves as yet another substitute to actually developing your characters. Anyway, Urca isn't super happy with the idea of adding months to their mission, and in the next scene, he leads a mutiny and forces Nico into hypersleep. Surprise, surprise, his plan that had a 90% success rate doesn't work for some reason, and more TVs fall off the ship. But whatever, command strip's not in the budget for a gigantic spacecraft or something? Nico manages to wake up and promptly saves the day by incapacitating Urca and steering the ship to safety, but not before the comms and navigation system get completely wiped out with a bunch of other stuff. She gives this whole speech to her crew about how she doesn't care that they don't like her and that they should just get back to work and deal with it.
You don't like me? I don't care.
Again, let's put aside our brains for a second and forget that her entire crew committed a mutiny against her, and that they are totally replaceable with other crew members who were reserved in hypersleep. You couldn't at least shelve this Urca guy who's proven no devotion or obedience to her command, even after they all almost died. Okay, so the writers were too lazy to make Urca's change of heart make sense. We're all just supposed to accept that after getting KO'd, he's somehow different now, right? You see, that's the plot hole you would expect at this point, but this episode has one last incredible feat for us to witness. That change of heart I just mentioned didn't actually happen, and the character is still evil. In the very next scene, he tries to murder Nico. So let me understand this, alright? They baited us into believing one shitty narrative and swapped it out with an even worse one. It's the 2-for-1 special, the rare case where the plot hole actually gets sucked into the plot convenience. Maybe that's what they meant by unimaginable danger, because I cannot imagine a more harebrained approach to shoehorning danger into this damn show. The episode just ends on the charred remains of Urca after his failed assassination, and the white text over black background credits roll, giving me ample space on my monitor to see my dejected appearance reflected back at me as I think about how many Bon Appetit videos I could have been watching in that hour of my time instead of this spectacular mess. So that was all pretty negative, and you can probably tell I really didn't like the show. It's nothing personal, obviously. I don't know the writers, director, or cast, and I'm sure they're all fine, motivated people. And maybe it was some pencil-pushing executive who hodgepodged these plot lines together. Maybe there was some earlier revision of the show that was way better. But all I can do is look at the end result and offer my personal perspective from my viewing experience. Now, on the other hand, I don't think it would be fair to say this show is all negatives. First of all, while it's incredibly difficult to judge acting independently of direction, writing, editing, and so on, I did get the sense that at least some of the actors were trying their best with what they were given. The special effects aren't awful and are used somewhat sparingly for a sci-fi show, which implies some intelligent use of the budget. It's a little refreshing to see, considering how many sci-fi superhero TV shows completely overestimate their capabilities and deliver something that looks like it was rendered on a PS2. The first episode definitely ranks near the bottom of the series, but there are 1 or 2 episodes that are a little more interesting and introspective. I know I didn't have a lot of positive things to say about the characters, but the way William the AI is developed is actually kind of interesting, especially towards the end of the series, but I'd be remiss not to remind you how much of the other stuff I mentioned you would have to sit through to even get to that point in the series. And yes, I realize I just turned a positive into a negative, and I should probably see a therapist, but at the end of the day, depending on how you like to watch your TV, the negative aspects might not even be all that important to you. But I think you can tell that I'm really grasping at straws here. Another Life is a great example of a sci-fi show that makes perfect sense to Netflix on paper and in the context of a pitch. I mean, it's a mysterious sci-fi television show that hits all the right notes, conceptually, of what a successful sci-fi TV show would look like. When it comes to execution, though, they completely dropped the spaceball. Then again, who knows? They apparently renewed it for a second season, so they seem to have some faith they'll be able to turn it around, but personally, I'd rather see Netflix focus on one of their existing sci-fi TV shows that didn't blow their first season. Some shows just deserve it more. But I'd really be interested in hearing what you think about this show and the future of Netflix. Did you watch it and come away with a completely different impression? Or is there another show that you feel is underrated and deserves more attention? As always, I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.